And good morning, everyone. Superintendent, I want to thank you for leading this incredible team of dedicated public servants, our New York State Police, but also to put a spotlight today on the very specialized work they do here at the New York State Intelligence Center. And I've been here for briefings prior to the 20th anniversary of 9/11. My second week on the job as governor, I understood that there were threats that need to be assessed, and I convened individuals here to make sure that I was aware of what was going on, as well as working with our other partners. And so thank you for all you do. I'll be introducing our Lieutenant Governor in a couple of minutes, but I want to thank him for joining us here today as we attack something that is painful to talk about because we are still reeling as a state. Our hearts are broken by the knowledge that this time last week we had 2 more officers on the beat, 2 young men in their 20s, 2 young men who had their entire lives ahead of them and their family, and one with a new spouse. And that was all shattered with a gun that was traced back to Baltimore, originating back in 2017. And that is what we're talking about here today. So we can get to a point where we don't grieve. We also celebrate our success and know that we have turned the corner on fighting gun violence. And this happens with incredible partners. We'll be talking about what's going on in the next room before I head in there and welcome them. But gun violence is a national crisis. 90 of the top 100 cities in America are seeing an escalation in gun violence cases. And we have to make sure that we're working together. And this is not a New York phenomenon. This is a national phenomenon. And we now have to pull together all the tools in a concerted way, not just deploying what we have available to us here in the state of New York, which is exceptional, but also saying, where are these guns coming from? They're not originating here in the state of New York. We've identified and traced states where they are originating and why their murder rate is higher, because the number of guns coming into our state is higher. The numbers bear this out. I've studied the data. And there's a phenomenon going on here that we're going to study and understand why this is the case. That as we enter 2022, we are seeing a dramatic increase in the number of guns finding their ways through our borders and into the hands of criminals. And we are seeing a concentration in places like the Bronx, Upper Manhattan, but also in other cities. I was just in Syracuse yesterday and Rochester a short time before that. This is a phenomenon that is occurring in cities all over America, but we're particularly focused on what's going on here in New York. And yes, the murders are up across the nation. It's not a great source of comfort, but New York State is faring better than others, safer than the rest of the country, but it's a similar trend. The numbers are going upwards. And we're also concerned about the victims of these crimes, in particular when members of our law enforcement are gunned down for doing nothing more than showing up in the cause of keeping the peace, which is what occurred just a short time ago in New York City. People and individuals thinking they're going to protect a woman from a threat, and they end up becoming victims. And that is what we're fighting against, but also the realization that in Black and brown communities, Black Americans are 8 times more likely to be murder victims as their white counterparts. So we have dynamics going on here to say we are heeding this call to action. We are compelled to do everything we possibly can. And that is why in my State of the State address, which occurred on January 5th, even before this most recent spate of violence, I said we need to come together with not just our allies in New York State, our partners everywhere from ATF. We have our ATF special agent in charge for the entire state is with us today, John DeVito. We welcome their partnership, our federal partners, bringing together our U.S. attorney's offices, the FBI, here in the state of New York. NYPD, of course, has been embedded with us for a considerable amount of time, but we're deepening those relationships now. But what about partners in the other states where the guns are originating? That is what has not been tackled successfully, in my judgment, in the past. And that's why I announced in my State of the State this formation of an Interstate task force on gun violence, illegal guns. And we will bring all these individuals together, as well as people from 9 states in the Northeast. This has not happened before. We have in the next room 50 individuals in person and on Zoom who are joining together in the common pursuit of stopping the guns from flowing into New York, ending up in the hands of criminals, and end up taking the lives of people we love and cherish. So we're pulling together this quickly, and what are they going to do? And I ask a lot of tough questions. I said, how are we going to judge success? I had a call this morning. How will we know that this is successful? Well, first of all, let's find out what is happening. Why are more guns happening? Do people have more money? Is there more something going on in those states, or people are looking to have the flow of guns come into New York to make a higher profit? Is this related to gang activity? Is it related to more domestic cases where people happen to have a gun and they use them, whereas if they didn't have the gun available, they would not? It might be another altercation, but it wouldn't result in death. So these are the questions we're asking right now. But what we have to focus on is real-time gathering of intelligence. Not wait a couple of days, not wait till a lab is finished analyzing, real-time, immediate response. And that is what we hope to attain by deepening the relationships, coming together toward this common purpose. And also operational coordination when it comes to gun interdiction. And we have very porous borders here in the state of New York. You think about guns that can easily flow in from the state of Pennsylvania. They have different gun laws, and we're proud of the gun laws we have here in the state of New York. And that's why we know our problem is being caused from out-of-state guns. So when we have the opportunity to have interdiction efforts along our border with Pennsylvania, identifying the gun shows where people are purchasing guns, loading up a trunk, and coming up I-81 or Route 90 in toward Western New York, and then the guns are ending up in our cities in particular. And that's the level of trafficking that we want to zero in on. Where are they coming from? Where are they going? And how we stop them. And ultimately, by combining our resources, we're going to be able to leverage our individual strengths and our resources. So I want to thank all of them for stepping up and answering this call. And I thank the governors of those states as well for participating. And in addition to this, we have a lot of work to do. You'll be hearing very shortly from Mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, who from day one, even before day one, we have been working closely together to address this situation, talking about violence in the subways, trying to restore people's confidence about coming back to their jobs. And we have a lot of work to do on that front, but it only happens when you have willing partners who bring all their resources and human capital together, smart people who gather in a place like today and get the ball rolling. My executive budget also shows tremendous support for law enforcement here in the state of New York, not just with the formation of this task force, but also we've added more money to increase our gun crime tracing. We have more money going out there to hire more social media analysts. This way we can find out early on what trends are out there, what are people talking about, what's the chatter, and perhaps identify individuals who are on the cusp of purchasing guns or trafficking in guns or even committing crimes. So that's going to be very helpful. Also more equipment, software, special onboarding of computer and cyber crimes unit, investing $13 more million into our crime analysis center network. So we're hitting this on all fronts, but making sure that at the end of the day, when we look at ourselves and say, did we do everything we could, that answer has to be yes. And that is another reason why I just recently extended an executive order that was put in place last summer to ensure that we are acknowledging the fact that we are still in a crisis. The executive order declares a gun violence state of emergency. That allows me to have flexibility for convening opportunities like this to let people know how deadly serious this is. And also, as I mentioned, some of the resources in our state budget, we are literally tripling the amount of money going toward our crime gun tracing efforts here with the state police. But also, that's one side of the equation. What's happening in these communities? And I've tripled the amount of money going into gun violence disruption programs and giving people opportunities to find a better path, not just with summer jobs, which we're going to do, but also throughout the year. And let young people know who are on that cusp of saying, which path am I going to take, that they have the right influences guiding them to ensure that they do take the right steps, continue their education, and do not end up in the streets or else worse, in a morgue themselves. That's what our focus is on right now. We also, in October, I signed a bill that closed loopholes in gun possession and registration. And also, this is not the prime driver of illegal guns in our state, but we also made sure that we were getting ahead of the whole phenomenon of ghost guns. And that's why I took the step of banning ghost guns here in the state of New York. And also, not just a law enforcement issue, but also a justice issue and an issue trying to get under the health effects that this has on communities and societies that are under siege right now. It has a dramatic effect on people's sense of security. And that to me is a painful aspect where people are feeling nervous and anxious. And in light of what we've come through with this pandemic, this is almost too much for people to bear. And that's why we're, as of today, I'm announcing the head of my new Office of Gun Violence Prevention. It is embedded in the Department of Health. And this is going to make sure that we're looking at all the collateral impacts of gun violence, but also perhaps the drivers of this, what leads people to this, and what is going on in their emotional and psychological worlds of what that could be driving people to these decisions. So I'm announcing today that Kellyanna Thomas is the new executive director. We'll be staffing her up. She comes with a tremendous experience in dealing with justice in New York City, so I want to welcome Kellyanna Thomas to our team as well. And again, having partners makes all the difference in the world. And I have an individual who's been at my side since I became governor exactly 6 months ago, and that is our Lieutenant Governor, Brian Benjamin. And he has insights that others do not have, and I need to rely on him and his knowledge of the community, particular Harlem, where he's from, where we're seeing these cases. And I want to thank him for being there at the side of the families and everyone who gathered in person the night these horrific attacks on our law enforcement, our police officers, Mora and Rivera, occurred. So thank you for being there. We were in communication nonstop last Friday night. You were there with the mayor of New York, and just thank you for your calm presence, Lieutenant Governor, and the guidance you continue to give me, as well as the people of the state of New York. And then after that, we'll be introducing by Zoom the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams. So thank you for joining us today. I'm very excited to launch this initiative. First time it's occurred, and I'm being told by our federal partners that they'd like to replicate this in other states and have this concentrated, intentional effort where there's now going to be daily communication in places where there had not been among other states, as well as the continued work we do with the NYPD and the state police, embedding them together. So this is a new day dawning. We are coming at this issue with all the resources we can deploy. Again, the human capital, the relationships, the partnerships, other states engaged to stop the scourge of illegal guns coming into our state and being in the hands of individuals who are using them to do harm and worse, to cause the death of other individuals, particularly our law enforcement officers. So, Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin.
Thank you, Madam Governor, for your leadership. Superintendent Bruin, thank you for yours as well. It is an honor to be here to work with our friends in law enforcement across 9 different states to work to bring the end to the scourge of gun violence. As the governor mentioned, I was at Harlem Hospital. I was born in Harlem Hospital, but I was at Harlem Hospital with the mayor, where we were tracking the progress related to the 2 police officers who we know have passed away, and we mourn for them, and we mourn with their families. And I saw the body cam, and the police officers acted with the utmost integrity and respect. They did everything that you would want them to do in a situation like that. And so it's very unfortunate that a legal gun was present that helped to end their lives. You know, I also think about the 11-month-old baby in the Bronx. Her parents were at a grocery store. Her mother was sitting in the front, and she was sitting in her car seat. And 2 individuals were out, and one shot the baby in the face. She celebrated her first year on this earth in a hospital. That is not the kind of life we want for any of our children. 6:45 p.m., that could have been any one of us with a young child. And so it is so essential that the work we're doing here today acknowledges that we can't only focus on what happens at the moment in that situation. Yes, we must hold the individuals accountable who committed those acts, but we must also hold the supply chain accountable where the illegal guns got to that place. Because if we do that, that will help us to end this scourge. This is exciting work to be a part of. You know, I can tell you, growing up, the mayor had recently said that there are about 30 precincts in the city that account for the majority of the violence. I can tell you, the majority of my life, I've lived in those precincts. and always would wonder, where are these guns coming from? I never saw a gun manufacturing facility growing up. I don't know anyone who got a 401k or who's has a pension because of working in any of these facilities. Who is bringing these guns into our communities? And so the question that we are here to ponder is, how is it getting here? You know, I've heard so much about an iron pipeline. Well, is that the case? Is it an iron pipeline, or is it more like cells of 1, 5, 3, 4 guns that are just being illegally trafficked across lines into a number of our states, which are then ending up causing so much destruction? That is the work we're doing. I'm excited to work on this because I think we will save lives by disrupting the supply chain, holding everyone accountable with the money that we're spending. Thank you, Governor, for your leadership on this. And it is really, for me, the honor of my life to be working on this, because there are people who I grew up with who I can say to them, the state of New York is doing everything it can to help make sure that your children and your lives will be protected. And so we are working alongside a really good partner, Mayor Eric Adams, who's going to be on the ground, making sure that we deal with the intervention issues that are required with NYPD. And here, we're going to be working on some of the intelligence analysis. You know, the governor mentioned social media analysts. You know, a number of these individuals who are trafficking guns, they're also on social media giving us clues that we need to be tracking and following and receiving so that we can disrupt the pipeline. That is what I think we are here to do, and thank you for your support. And I want to introduce at this time the mayor of New York City, our partner in helping to bring gun violence to an end in New York State, Mayor Eric Adams.
Thank you so much, Governor Hochul. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin, and to the entire team that is assembled together to understand that right now, our city, our state, and our country, we have become an ocean of violence, a sea of violence. And as I have indicated, there are many rivers that are feeding this sea. And if we don't build a dam on each one of the rivers, we are going to become counterproductive, and we're going to lose innocent families and children. Yesterday, in a hospital in the Bronx, Jacoby Hospital, the incident personified how urgent the moment is. A person appeared to have gone to the hospital because they had an asthma problem. And while in the hospital, they noticed a rival, gang member possibly. He pulled out a gun and shot the person. And sitting in the emergency room at the time were families, a child, and hospital staff. But that was only one of many problems. While I was there at the hospital, one of the police officials who's now in charge of the security shared with me that at a previous time, prior to this incident, the person went to the hospital for medical concerns. And while they were there getting an x-ray, the x-ray technician and staff noticed that the person on the x-ray show was carrying a firearm during the x-ray. We have normalized the carrying of guns in our city, in our state, and in many cases in our country. We have no longer made it taboo to do so. The constant availability of weapons, the individual who was responsible for taking the lives of Officer Rivera and Moya had an automatic modified weapon that carried 40 rounds of ammunition and an additional AR-15 assault rifle under his mattress. This is what we are up against. And if we don't become honest, as the governor pointed out, I really want to commend us, her, and everyone must listen to what she stated. We have to analyze every river and dam every river to stop the flow. We need to understand what are we doing legislatively on the state level that are allowing dangerous people to return to our streets. We need to understand why the guns are continually flowing to the cities throughout this country. We need to understand why we are continuing to produce broken children that turn into broken adults and become broken people to commit violence. We need to understand the connectivity to our failures in education, our failures in opening our court system. I take my hat off to the Chief Justice that made immediate modifications on the social distancing requirements from 6 feet to 3 feet so we can start getting people back in the courtroom. We need to understand how the slowdown in processing DNA data has prevented gun cases from moving forward. And we need to understand that far too many defense attorneys and public defenders are not in the courtroom. If we don't look at every river and dam each river, we're going to continue to have this sea of violence, particularly gun violence. And the partnership that we are announcing today is in alignment with my conversation with the President of the United States several months ago. We learned so much after the World Trade Center attack on 2001, September 11th. We made up our minds that we will not sit back and allow terrorists from foreign shores to come to our country. And we produce information sharing. That's what this consortium is going to do. But we also are doing it in New York City. During my time of campaigning, I talked about bringing city, state, and federal agencies together. Every morning at 10 a.m., we're seeing that with the gun violence strategic partnership that's taking place here in New York City. We are seeing with the governor's announcement today that it is time for us to use the same abilities that we displayed during September 11th to stop the external terrorist threat. We are going to use that with the terror of gun violence that's sweeping our entire nation. We must be unified on this threat. And I'm happy to have a governor that has acknowledged the importance of this moment. And it was clear in your comments, Governor, Black residents are 8 times more likely to die from gun violence. That is a blemish on our country. To sit back and watch the terror that Black and brown families are experiencing every day, yet we are failing to move with the level of urgency that we did in other crises. Our entire country mobilized against the COVID threat to make sure that it did not continue to spread throughout this entire state and country. That's the same energy. That's the same level of intelligence that we must use to end the pandemic of gun violence. We must muster the strength of our social media corporations, muster the strength of our medical facilities, of our educational systems, our law enforcement systems. All of us must come together to resolve this issue. And the police officers in this city and state, they are doing their job. We removed 6,000 guns off the streets in New York City in 2021. Over 300 guns were removed during my first few weeks in office. They can't do this alone. We cannot continue to lose 22-year-old children because of the failure of the other partners in this fight against gun violence. Today, we are now acknowledging we're going to do our share. Now it's time for government and all other entities to do their share so we can finally turn back the crisis of gun violence that has destroyed far too many communities, far too many individuals, and far too many families. So, Governor, I thank you. And I want you to know that I'm your partner as we fight against the overproliferation of guns in our city and in our state and in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for joining us. We truly appreciate your work, and we're going to continue working together. And that's the way we now have a relationship. Relationship between Albany and New York City is going to result in the relationships that were not there before that are going to make a huge difference in people's lives. So thank you very much, Mayor. With this, I'll be happy to take any questions related to what we're doing, and I have to take just a couple because I have to run next door because these people have traveled far and wide, and they have joined us, and we want to make sure that they know they're welcome. We want to continue their work. So first question.
Good morning, Governor. Grace Ashford with the New York Times. Congratulations on 6 months in office.
Thank you.
There's been a lot of talk about bail reform lately, with Mayor Adams calling for changes. Yesterday, DCGS Commissioner testified that the available data didn't provide a complete picture. Even so, the available data has been sort of debated between Democrats and Republicans, and everyone sort of seems to think what they have vindicates them. I'm curious whether you see a need for a conversation right now about changes to the bail laws, and if not, why?
I'm very data-driven, and I'm very interested in the data that comes out, but as the mayor mentioned, we are talking about damming up individual rivers. Today, the river we're talking about is the river that leads illegal guns from other states to our cities and in the hands of individuals who are using them. So that is our focus of what we're doing here today. As I've said from the beginning, there's opportunities to have these conversations with the mayor as well as with the legislature as session unfolds on any reforms that are recommended.
Governor, there are calls for you to talk about bill reform right now. Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik just issued a letter on bail reform, and Republicans in Congress have proposed a bill that would reward states that give judges more discretion in determining dangerousness. Will you address what so many people have called on you to do? Will you address the level of dangerousness and give judges more discretion? Even Eric Adams has called on lawmakers to do this.
He has asked for us to have this conversation, and he's a former senator, and he certainly knows the process that's involved in making changes. Changes were made. And I will absolutely stand behind the fundamental premise on why we needed bail reform in the first place. And I will describe the situation that others who are trying to politicize this and the other party don't seem to acknowledge why there was a need for change. You had two individuals accused of identical crimes, offenses, even stealing a backpack. And one person goes to Rikers for 3 years because they couldn't post bail. Another person whose parents have money or they're living in the suburbs and they can head back after posting bail to their jobs, to school, and a different life. That is what bail reform set out to do. And so I stand behind that fundamental premise. And I've also said if reforms are needed based on data that is still being gathered, I'm willing to have those conversations. So I don't feel just because people, for political reasons, like the individuals that you're quoting here today, want me to give an answer. That's not how I operate. I don't cave to pressure. I do what's right based on all the facts that come before me.
It's not just Elise Stefanik and Republicans. Even Chief Administrative Judge Lawrence Marks told lawmakers this week that he believes that judges are coming together and agreeing that they need more power.
And I'm looking for the data that shows me that bail reform is the reason that somehow crime is going up in 90 of 100 cities in New York, why guns are flowing from Georgia with more frequency and Virginia and Ohio to here than they were. I'm focused on dealing with what I have control over right now, and that is my laser focus. The issue before me is today, in real time, bring the resources together to stop guns from coming into our streets and resulting in the shooting of a baby and the murder of our police officers. Nick?
Governor, are we seeing similar issues in New York City that we're seeing also in like Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, and not just, general gun violence, but kind of similar systemic root causes for what's going on?
Nick, this is exactly why I'm excited about the new Office of Gun Violence Prevention in the Department of Health. People have been shaken to their core from this pandemic. And I asked the question on a briefing call this morning. The numbers that we're seeing now did not exist in 2019. This was not the top of mind issue in New Yorkers or New York City, in Buffalo, Rochester at the time, because it was under control. And the statistics still bear out the fact that there were decades that were far worse. Now, I'm not satisfied with this. One act of gun violence, particularly that results in the death of another person, is one too many. But I want to put this in context, that this is not just a New York City or a New York State phenomenon, but I'm seeing the same impacts. People lost their jobs. They lost their safety net. They lost their support systems where they couldn't go get substance abuse treatment or mental health treatment. People fell through the cracks in unprecedented ways during this pandemic, and we need to be sensitive to that and realize that that is not an excuse to harm another human being, but it's also what is going on in their lives and their communities that we need to help them heal and let them get on a path. And maybe it's helping them get that job we're talking about, getting them with someone who's a former gang member who will become a mentor for individuals. I announced this in Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse just last summer. We're going to continue. We actually tripled the amount of money going into those programs. So, Nick, you're absolutely right that there are other forces at play that we're trying to analyze right now in real time because it's still going on, of why there's been such a dramatic increase in gun violence, an 80% increase over a fairly short time. But it also says to me, given the short time frame where this has really become a heightened crisis, we also have the resources and the tools and the wherewithal to drive it down quickly. I'm hoping that we'll see something similar to what I track every single day and every single night, the Omicron surge. It went up quickly, and then now it's dropping quickly. I believe that we have the capability to address gun violence the same way, and a large part of it comes from stopping them before they cross the borders into New York and get into the hands of individuals who will do harm to others.
Governor, to be clear, to what extent are you blaming illegal guns from out of state for the current surge in shootings? And what is the timeline for getting actionable findings from this new task force?
Soon. I told them I'm going to be judging their results very quickly. I asked them to identify what success looks like. How will they know that this has been a successful endeavor so we can replicate this elsewhere? But there's been an increase, 80% increase in firearm homicides, and 75%, let me make sure you have these statistics, 80% increase in firearm homicides here in the state of New York since 2019. 75% of the guns committed in those crimes came from out of state. So there is a direct correlation between what is occurring when people walk around, as the mayor talked about. The availability of guns is not the sole source of this problem, but it is one as governor of the state that has porous borders, and the flow of guns is apparent to us. It has been going on, but now it has been exacerbated. I want to know why. Why now more than before are we seeing this increase? What is going on in those other states? What is going on with drug deals? What is going on with gang activity? Why are more guns than ever before flowing into the streets of New York, making violence so easily accessible, people to commit violence because they have guns in their pockets when they walk into an emergency room? So that is what and so I'll be I'm going there right now to welcome them and tell them I'm looking forward to their analysis, and I will be coming back over and over and over and showing all of you the results. And if something isn't working the way I expect, we pivot, we try another approach. But I'm not going to sit back while this is going on in the state of New York. People are fearful. They should live free of this anxiety in their communities, just like they did before 2019, 2020, when we saw this dramatic change. So I am going to welcome them. They've traveled great distance, but thank you, everybody, for coming out today.
Will you release the transcripts of what they